Ratliff, father of the groom. I am Zang, as the alien/animal. Ghost, as the horsepex. Jim Clark, the groom.
Arasutku, bride. And now, before the marriage, the father of the groom and the father of the bride must agree to the marriage because they are the pater familiaris of the family.
I think that Alara and Jim should get married.
Sure.
This is a good agreement.
Unfortunately, if the father of the groom is indisposed of or killed, the groom does it instead.
Jim, I think you should marry Alara.
Okay.
Right on. Jim, take this can of minestrone to marry Alara.
Of course. I love her.
And now we have the customary ancient Roman procession and ceremony of exchanging gifts from bride to groom and groom to bride.
Here, will you accept this?
Sure.
This Lunchables Transformers item?
Cool. Will you accept this granola bar?
Of course, sweetheart.
And now that we see the two are madly in love with each other and the material goods they have given to each other, the customary thing to do is for the groom to offer the bride a ring, which is to be placed on the third finger on the left hand.
Thank you.
Someone threw a ring.
Thanks.
And now they are engaged. Awesome. And now we have the ceremonial pulling away of the bride, where the father is supposed to try to keep the bride, but he can't because the groom is too strong and manly and powerful for him, because it's the father. Whoops. So here, in a well-lit night before the engagement begins, before the wedding ceremony begins, the bride is taking off her below, which is her locket, which is given to her right during birth to protect her, and she's dedicating it to the Lares, or the household gods, so that her marriage may be blessed. Here we have the torchlit procession of the bride and the groom. The bride is wearing her flammium, or red veil, unlike traditional weddings in the modern era that is red instead of white. I'd like to take this time to mention the two marriages that can occur since they're having a Junctio Dextratrum, which is basically they're holding hands. One type of marriage is called cum manu, or with the hand. In this case, the groom has full ownership of the wife, and as a result can command most of what the wife decides to do. The wife becomes essentially property for the groom. Next is the sine manu, or without hand. In this type of marriage, the bride does not leave her family to go to the groom's, instead stays with her father, in which case she is to become her father's property instead. In the sine manu, the bride has a lot more power over her own life and her own decisions than in cum manu. Alright, finally, we come to the marriage. In this case, there are a couple of things that have to be said. Initially is the words ube to Gaius ego Gaia. This is something that the bride is going to say.
Ubi to Gaius Gallia.
And then the groom will say,
Ubi to Gaia ego Gaius.
and so they will be married and stuff. Finally is the matronae univirae. This is where, because this is the first time our bride is getting married, she's going to take off her clothes for the groom. And now she's going to put them back on.
Here we are sacrificing an animal to prove if this marriage will be good or not.
Wow, these omens are out of this world.
And now we have the signing of the marriage contract, which is done by the bride and the groom to show that they are dedicated to each other and are going to stay married. Look at that.
There you go.
And now look at this. Okay. Oh, and that's the groom's signature somewhere there. Yeah.
It's not right.
And here we have one of the ways to get into the previously accounted cum manu, which is the ceremony of the conferatio. This is where the bride and the groom would eat a sacred cake, which looks like a Trix bar, called the far, or what was made of grain called far. And they would eat this, and that's how they would get engaged in cum manu marriage, which means that the bride and the groom, the bride is owned by the groom. You can eat the cake. Unfortunately, conferatio was a practice that only lived until about 69 AD. The practice later died out, probably because Trix bars taste awful. And finally, we have the wedding feast, which is paid for by the father of the groom, father of the bride, who will wave her hand. Yeah. So this is to symbolize the closing of the marriage, and so the father of the bride pays for it because the bride is a very good candidate for junior class president. And so now they're going to be eating the feast, which looks a lot like a Trix bar, which is what might have been used for the conferatio. Strangely enough, this grain is too fine for the Romans to have made it themselves. The only explanation for grain this fine is some sort of extraterrestrial life.
I am now anointing the doorpost. Oil. For good luck.
And now we have the parting of the bride's hair, done by the father of the bride, using a spear that was coated in the blood of the alien animal. This is for good omens, or something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Is it starting? Okay. And now we've seen the different topics outlined in ancient Roman marriage, including the engagement ceremony, the actual ceremony of the marriage, and finally the wedding feast and the wedding song. Throughout these three topics, we've explored some of the roles that aliens might have had in different aspects of ancient marriage, including things such as the carafatio, which is the ancient cake, the torchlit procession, and the wedding song. Before we conclude, we'd like to compare some of the aspects of ancient Roman marriage and modern marriage, such as the sacrificing of the animal, as well as the parting of the bride's hair. These two aspects can only be explained by things the History Channel would like to consider as alien. This has been an episode of Ancient Aliens.
Oh, please no. Cringe Fest 20.